next project is a 1972 Nissan 2000 GTX. It makes a lot of noise, but
looks good.
Yeah, it looks fantastic. The interior to the exterior of this car is perfect as far as I'm concerned. The only thing that's really been kind of the Achilles heel of this car has been the power delivery, and that's what we're going to address here with this new motor. I'm really excited to finally get a motor in this car that kind of backs up the looks this car has, because exterior-wise, I mean, this is one of the best-looking Hakoskas we've ever had. We actually have quite a bit of history with this car. All right, Josh, you remember this one?
Yeah, that was a while ago.
Yeah, this is one of the first ones we did. We imported this car from Japan about 6 years ago. We did some cleanup on the body, the exterior. We also cleaned up the motor, but it was still the original motor for the car. So this is still a 2-liter. I mean, it looks like a 500 horsepower motor, but in all reality, we're looking at about 100, 115 horsepower max.
Tiny port L28.
Yeah.
The L28 is original to the GT and GTX. They don't make a lot of power. They're just mainly designed to work, and they do work very well.
He's looking for about double the power, but I think more than anything else, he wants it to be reliable. So like
Also go fuel injected.
I think that's one way to do it for sure. Triple carburetors, they can be, you know, reliable, but they do require a little bit more attention. He really wants that car that he can just get in and start and drive at any time, you know, take his family down the road. So I guess it's up to us to figure out what to do with the motor.
Yeah.
What we're doing here, most of all, is trying to get more power out of it. So in choosing a motor for this car, we definitely wanted to keep it within the realm of what was already there. So that being said, we wanted to keep it straight six, and we also wanted to keep it Nissan. But in addition to that, we were looking for something a little bit more modern, fuel injected, and a bit more reliable with more power. We will also be doing a complete set of gauges, and then because we're converting to fuel injection, we'll also need to go through the entire fuel system. Suspension, chassis, body, interior, everything else is in really good shape. So we have our new motor here, and it's kind of a mess. First thing to go is a stupid cover. What we're looking for is a clean block to start from, so everything's got to be disassembled. The motor that we're using here is an RB25 Neo to just out of the box double the horsepower. Hideous manifold.
Considering what we had, and we're trying to, you know, be similar with a little bit more modern flair and more power, I think it's a great fit. Oh, gross. I just haven't been out probably ever.
Probably ever.
I'm just pulling these off because they're nasty. Oh, dang. Want to see some filth?
Yikes. It looks like this motor's been sitting a while and there is sludge everywhere.
So when you let oil sit and separate for a period of time, this is what happens to it. All this is sludge, everything. It's all hard, which isn't a big deal anyway because this is getting hot tanked, but it's gross. It comes right off. You just have to deep clean the head. You know, it just depends on how severe it is, but it's not okay. It's not acceptable for, you know, daily driving or operating, so it all needs to be removed and cleaned.
Yeah, that does not look good. Oh. I got it. You got it? Yeah. Well, aside from all that junk on the top of the pistons, everything else looks really good. The cylinders look solid, but the head had a lot of sludge in there, so there could be other issues.
The chambers look good. Valve seats, everything look clean. It's not too crusty.
Yeah, not a huge amount of carbon deposits in there.
Yeah, it seems to be the worst thing is just how long the oil sat in here.
Yeah, this will all be taken apart and cleaned up, but so far so good.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Now that we've got it all disassembled, I'm really happy with what we're seeing so far. After a good hot tank and real thorough cleanup of everything, we should be in good shape. So the original fuel tank worked perfectly fine with the carbureted setup, but because we're going to fuel injection, we'll have to make some changes. But a fuel injection setup requires constant pressure in the line. If you've got fuel sloshing to one side or the other, what'll end up happening is it will suck dry and then the motor's gonna misfire and you're gonna have problems. So we're trying something a little bit different on this one. We're gonna try to use the existing tank with this different sending unit. In order to do that, we're using what's called a hydromat setup. It's basically a big sponge that will sit in the bottom of the tank that makes sure that you always have fuel. The old fuel pump setup was mounted externally. On this fuel injected setup, we're gonna have to mount it inside the tank. So we have to make sure that there's absolutely no fuel in the tank. We actually added some water in there because we don't want Josh burning up that beautiful beard.
There's probably some gel residue at the bottom that may be flammable. Those are your do-it-yourselfers. It's probably similar to your copper pipe sweating. I have to do stuff like this a lot, and what you have to think about is, you know, you're not gonna do it with a fuel tank full of gas, obvious hazard, so you just wanna wash it out and make sure it's good, because all it is solder and metal anyway. I've done sketchier things. Hey man, check this out.
Good boy.
With everything removed, we're able to cut the holes in this fuel tank. It's always fun.
Sweet. We waited to do this one so that I have an access hole, which allows me to hook onto that sending unit, and I can move it all the way up through its motion and all the way down, and we have no contact issue with that, so it's exactly what we want. So raise that overflow line back in, and then we'll paint whatever else is there and drop it in the car, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Kind of lucky, because if this were a GTR, it would be a lot bigger. The GTR was designed to go to the track. You know, you don't want to spend a lot of time making pit stops for fuel or just always worrying about your fuel consumption, so they had a 100-liter tank. The joys of working with almost 50-year-old rubber mean that, you know, you have to heat this up to get it to fit, because it does not want to go in anymore. It's form molded.
Sweet.
It's always fun. So we got our RB25 head back from the machine shop, and it looks great. Being that this engine was a low miles automatic transplant, really, that we got, it was probably just in some old lady's R34 or something, which is kind of funny. The R34, it's kind of sought after by everybody. It's kind of an unobtainable car. This is going to be kind of a show engine, so it's pretty damn clean. Yeah, I should throw this thing on. The version that this engine came in was just probably like your standard either 2-door or 4-door automatic, like grandma would have drove it to the store and picked up groceries or whatever, so it wasn't Godzilla, but you know, they're still really neat. Golden. It's a relatively just an OEM reseal, just clean up, and then we just added a few little things here and there, so it's not too crazy. Just put a little bit of oil on it so I don't have a dry contact. Cool. That looks pretty damn good.
So we have all the parts here that we needed for our intake setup. Finding them just on their own was a challenge, but the bigger part of this challenge is actually making them work on this motor. That's a problem. So the first problem we've run into here is our solenoid that controls the cam timing on the intake side, which is what makes the Neo it is kind of causing some issues with the RB26 intake manifold. I mean, we knew it wasn't going to be a bolt-on affair. So we're going to have to figure out how to make those two work together, because we definitely need to keep that in place. About to cut into a pretty rare, hard to find piece. So, point of no return now. The idea here is to go slowly. We can only remove so much from this manifold. The last thing we want to do is make a hole in it that has to be welded. So height-wise, we're close. We still got to get a connector on there. But this is for gauge cluster warning, which we're not going to need. Because this particular setup has never been tried before that I know of, you know, we're just going to have to take it as we go and work through each step as we come across each problem. Piece by piece. Yaha. Okay. Now I've got it to work with the solenoid, but we're not quite out of the woods yet. So we're now running into an issue with this water line, which we knew we were gonna have an issue with, but we don't actually need for this application. So I'm gonna cut it off, we're gonna crimp it and weld it up. I'm almost done here making the modifications I needed to make on the intake manifold. But as I'm cutting, I got a little surprise. Take a look at my eyeball real quick. I think it bounced out. Luckily, this one had more bark than bite thanks to my safety glasses. Safety first, kids. It's funny, as you move, you just move into more problems. I'm now touching on this outlet. Just want to get that flat. Have a look. I'm thinking that might be it. The oil pan that came on this car was for an all-wheel drive car. The difference with the all-wheel drive setup is that the differential is actually part of the oil pan. Because it's a different configuration that way, it actually uses these larger bolts because of the weight of it. When we convert to rear-wheel drive, we're using the inner flange here, so this inner set of bolts. The reason the rear-wheel drive pan doesn't quite work as planned is because the oil pickup is in two different places. Normally, on a rear-wheel drive setup, your oil pickup would be here, but because this is not drilled for it, it would make our life easier if it was. That's where it is. So that's why we've had to make this modification to get it to sit down flat in the pan there. As simple as that sounds on paper, it's a little bit different in process.
Always fun.
This just goes to show that there's a whole lot of work on a swap like this that sometimes will never be seen. Our valve covers, however, will be seen, and they just got back from powder coat. Part of the reason for the gold is that it's a GTX model. This being an original GTX model, all of the badging on that car was actually gold. It was red for the GTR, blue for the GT, and gold for the GTX. This is the original crankcase fittings that used to come out of it, which we're not using anymore. We're converting to AN fittings. So I'll be tapping these, and we'll have these run to our crankcase breather. Perfect. Both valve covers with the fittings. Just got to put some sealant on there, but before we do that, we're going to go ahead and do the rest of the work we need to do as far as exposing this machine part. The valve cover is actually the central focal point of the motor, so we want to make sure we get these looking as cool as possible. They have that finned look in the top, which for me kind of gives it more of an old school vibe. For a lot of people, it's kind of out there, but it's also very Japanese.
Those are sick. It's like just subtle enough that it's like really tasteful.
It kind of makes a statement, and I've always loved gold. I love gold.
No, this way, this way.
We go to a lot of car shows throughout the year, but there's one that we never miss, and that's the Japanese Classic Car Show in Long Beach, California.
This is kind of like where everyone comes out of their cave and kind of just congregates and talks about everything, so that's cool.
If you do this era of Japanese cars, this is where you have to be. You're gonna see pretty much, I would say, late 60s to early 90s here. They have to be 25 years old. That's what makes it a classic Japanese car. It's that one time a year when we actually get to put in some FaceTime with some of these people, aside from just, you know. Should we put this car in the center, this way, right?
Yeah.
When it comes to getting the boost set up, I always look for input from Naomi.
Are you
And then these
keeping
two
the
coming
towel
out.
on it?
No, that's just to protect the dash.
Well, I didn't know if it was like a JDM thing that I'm just unaware of.
I'm just looking to see if the angles are right.
I don't know.
You didn't
They
bring
like
your JDM towel?
quirky things.
So back
I
to
liked
the
it.
question, the initial question that I asked.
Eric generally has a pretty good idea of how he wants this car staged.
I like that one in
Never
the
mind.
center because,
No,
okay, you
I
have
know that.
hood, no hood, hood.
I know,
right?
we already decided that. What I'm saying is, I'm wondering straight, angle, angle. Yeah? Does that make sense?
But if I see that something is tweaked the wrong way, I'm gonna speak up.
Except that they're all white, but they're all different colors of white.
Again, not exactly what I was looking for, not even close.
I was just looking for your approval because I know what happens when things get out of place and I get in trouble for it, so.
Whatever, tomatoes, tomatoes, go ahead.
So after some adjustments to the booth, it's time to do what we came here for.
That thing is crazy. It's such a tiny car, though. Look at the van, man. The vans are so cool. Look at those.
Those are sick.
Those are factory, dude. Wow.
Those are so sick. This is the most like 80s thing I've ever seen.
You can definitely tell what era that was built in. It's cool, man.
All the racing beat stuff, the seats.
I just love that it's got a jet ski in the back.
Hey, man, how are you?
Good to see you.
Good to see you as well.
I don't know what's better, checking out all the cool cars or catching up with old friends.
Give me the update, because we saw this car before.
Absolutely. It is a 3.5 liter now. It has the billet crank, so we've gone up in displacement. We've changed the angle. We've changed the exhaust. We've gone to Gen V fuel injection. And then now let's talk about the super sexy part, the transmission. What do? Your engine's here, right? The shifter's here. No, the shifter's over there. No, it's over there. So I got an adapter plate that allows the 350Z 6-speed to bolt into this car. Where does the shifter end up? Right where it went before.
Nice.
And so now this car has 6 speeds.
A 6-speed Z, that's impressive. But that begs the question.
So we got to be knocking on 400-ish?
Well, so it made 476 on the Rebello dyno, and it made 340 foot-pounds of torque. And as soon as we get back to San Jose, our goal is we want to make 400 wheel with an L-Series Datsun.
Dude.
But it's just strange because even when this car isn't on, it makes a sound. Listen.
You know, I've seen a lot of these cars multiple times, but it's always cool to see them again and just hear the stories behind the build.
This is a...
So 72, it's seventh from the
72.
last one made.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and last serial number known on the register. I purchased it pretty much the way you see it.
Yeah.
And it's a regular driver for us.
Myron is actually a longtime friend and actually a client of ours. We've helped him source a couple of cars. And you can tell just by looking at Myron that he's going to have a stylish car.
My favorite thing about these cars is the whole interior layout. The steering wheel, the bezels on the gauges, all the toggle switches, the houndstooth. This is a huge part of Mazda's heritage. It's the first production rotary for Mazda. You look at the car and it's got this like futuristic George Jetson vibe. Stylistically, there's not a whole lot of anything that looks similar to this.
It's not the most original Cosmo in the world, but it's the most driven Cosmo in the world.
Bro, you know what? That's awesome.
Speaking of original, the other car that Myron brought is something you definitely don't see every day.
Only one in the country. That makes it pretty rare.
We're here at the Japanese Classic Car Show, and I just stumbled across another textbook reason of why I never missed this show.
Wow, so what year is this one, Myron?
This is 75, and they were hand-built up until about 76. Those are the round headlight cars.
Okay.
They did an update on them in 77, did square headlights, bigger bumpers. At that point, they become factory-built.
And there can't be more than 2 or 3 of these.
This is the only round headlight car I know of in the States.
Only one in the country. That makes it pretty rare.
Seeing this car alone made the 10-hour journey worth it.
It's beautiful, man, and the paint.
It's not original paint, but it looks spectacular
It
on
looks
the car.
fantastic. The consistency of the metallics laying down.
The driving experience doesn't really live up to the looks.
Oh, really?
You know, it's a beautiful car, but underneath, it's kind of a basic. It's the same thing that was under an Isuzu pickup at the time.
Yeah.
But you're looking good going down the road.
That's right, man.
I really like the interior.
It's an original interior.
It's very Italian feeling.
Yeah, and the wood dash, again, was just in the round headlight cars, and then they started adding power windows and things like that.
The interior design is cool. I always pay attention to that. You can tell there's a lot of Italian influence there.
I mean, it's kind of a cool looking valve cover, though. I kind of like it's like a cast.
Yeah.
Just gives it character. It just has, I don't know, I love it. When you have a nice paint job, it really sells the car, in my opinion.
You have the craziest collection.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that.
I love it.
I'll take that as a compliment.
One thing's for sure about this car show,
That's way more fun than it should be.
there's always something new around every corner.
This thing is crazy.
I love it.
What is this one, Josh?
It's an 83, right? 83 Celica.
I love it.
It's like an original race car, everything. Still got the gaudy wheels, it's still externally regulated. It's a pure race car, I love it.
Dude, the wheels are crazy, man.
Oh, thanks. They're so rad.
So how long have you been looking for these for?
7 years.
7 years. So they're actually vented.
Yeah, they are vented,
So this comes all the way through and actually will
and it does
cool
cool
the
your brakes.
The only set I know that has one set in the whole entire country, right?
From what I'm told is that these are the last ones in existence. Like, you can't even find one for sale.
The search of it, it's what makes you so much more hungry. You keep looking for your parts, you know, that's the exciting of it.
So many of these parts can't just be ordered from a catalog. Networking is huge in this industry.
Sometimes you get in a situation where it's your only chance, and you just have to do it.
Looks killer, man.
Thank you.
How much horsepower do you think this has?
I don't know. A lot.
Is this yours?
Yes, it is.
Very nice, my friend.
Thank you.
Tell me a little bit about it.
I bought it in 1974. I was in the Navy
Okay.
in Japan.
Okay.
And a Navy doctor had it, and he was getting married, and she had a big dog.
Okay.
So they weren't gonna fit.
All right.
I got it.
If you ask me, the owner of this car is the lucky dog here.
Notice you got a 432 grill on here too. This is an original one, isn't it?
Yeah.
You can tell by the rivets on it.
I collected parts for 10 years.
Yeah, this would not be an easy thing to find anymore.
No,
And if you did,
no.
it might cost you a grand or two. I never know.
Yeah, I mean, that's just the fun of this, you know? It's whatever you can find, it's like a treasure hunt.
Very nice work on the car, my friend.
It's fantastic.
It's unfortunate that JCCS is only a one-day show, but after seeing everything we saw, reconnecting with friends, checking out builds, I mean, we wouldn't miss it for the world.
We love it, man. I love doing it every year.
Our B25 Neo is now assembled and ready to go. First thing we've got to do is pull out the old motor and make room for the new one.
Comes the fun part. All right.
We've already actually repainted the engine bay in this car, so we need to make sure that we're extra careful getting this motor out because the last thing we want to do is make any damage in the process. To be honest, I'm worried more about getting the new one in than the old one out.
Drip that fuel on me. Smells good.
Smells good?
Yep. I don't think you can work on these old vintage cars without, you know, having to deal with scents, fumes, you know, oils, weird liquids, strange substances. It's just part of it. I've watched cars fall on people. Usually Chevy trucks, because the frame rails are round and they don't use the pads that are like U-shaped, they use the round pads. And so like the whole truck will basically just drop and pivot and then, so you have like a couple seconds to get the hell out of the way or you're getting crushed by 6,000 pounds or whatever. Getting the engine in these is always tricky, especially when you have a finished engine bay, because obviously you don't want to hit anything, dent anything, you know, chip paint, crack paint.
And the white sheet treatment.
Yep.
Josh and I have pulled quite a few of these motors out, but the nicer the engine bay, the more stress there is involved.
Be fine. Cool. Actually, hold on, let me hook this way. I just don't want it to hit and not cover it. Normally you'd use a chain, but for this instance, I like to use heavy-duty straps just so when they rub against aluminum, it doesn't chip it, mar it, damage the metal. We're free. Just trying to keep the header and clutch from hitting the firewall.
Yeah, we got stacks over here. We're good in front. Close back there.
We're good back here.
Okay.
I got a hand on it.
We're getting close.
It's always a game of inches with these motors.
Just kind of guide that on the front. And we're free.
Today's a big day. The RB25 Neo's ready to go in, and Josh and I are ready to do it. So we put our old valve covers back on to make sure that nothing happens to those nice new ones we've got, but so far everything's looking really good.
So I think we know transmission itself is going to be a potential problem. We also have a little bit of a longer sump, so that's another area we need to look at.
Front to back, it's the exact same length as the L series, it's just wider. Same with the transmission, so it's just, all the fine-tuning parts of a swap that you have to deal with.
Because we can't remove our core support, we've got to lift this thing all the way up and over, get it at a crazy angle.
Yeah, crazy angle, pick up the trans,
Yep.
set it in, and then just kind of dip it in.
Yep.
Like an Oreo.
Like an Oreo.
Did a little trolling motor for that thing. For years, I've been pulling engines, and I've pulled a lot with Eric, and every time we do this, we're always very careful, and it's still tricky.
Do you want to lift the tail section over that?
Yeah. Come this way a little bit. This is where you really trust your foreign-made chain here.
Halfway in and everything's looking good, but we still have to make sure that sump clears.
I want to bring it down some.
Good back here.
We'll get it in a little bit more. Lower it down.
Oh, stop.
We were hoping for it to clear without any problems, but looks like we're gonna have to make some changes, and this is a big one. So from what I'm seeing, where the transmission needs to be, where the motor mounts need to be, we're either gonna need to modify the oil pan or modify the subframe. We just have to decide which one is the makes the most sense, so. Not the drop-in we were hoping for. I've performed a similar swap in a later Skyline about 8 years ago, so I'm gonna look at some of those old photos and see what I can figure out. That's a Ken Mary subframe
It is a
that we did on the last one, but I don't think they're much different, if any different at all.
Yeah, the differences are minimal, but those minimal differences can turn into large problems.
I mean, the only thing I can think of is that subframe on the Ken Mary that we did, maybe it comes back further. I mean, it's definitely a different design here.
It would appear that the later model Skylines actually have a different subframe that allows for a little bit more oil pan clearance, which is why we're running into the issues we're running into on this early Skyline. The oil pan, we want to keep it as it is, so we're going to leave the oil pan alone and modify that subframe. You're doing motor swaps, you're going to have to do some cutting, I mean, if it was easy, we wouldn't have a job, so.
Yeah, we'll pretty much probably forget everything we did by the time we do the next one and be like, oh, remember that time when we had to cut the subframe? Sure do.
That is why I take pictures.
Okay, set that back down. Set this there.
As you can imagine, Skyline subframes are few and far between, so we have to make sure we're really careful when we make our cuts.
That's cut. You can do the rest of it with the cutoff wheel. It's a little more flexible now.
Yeah.
So this is a pretty big part of the project. The subframe holds the motor, and it also is where the suspension attaches. So we have to make sure that whatever material we take out of it, we add just as much back in to make it as strong, if not stronger, than it was before.
Let's see what that's looking like.
Can you hold that again? So I can
Oh, yeah, sorry. Once you get them started, we'll just zip them back up. Yeah, like we did before.
Now that everything's done, we've got everything boxed in. Not only is it going to work as far as clearance, but we've also got something that's going to be really, really strong.
I think we're looking pretty good right now. What we have here is a 1971 240Z, the very first generation of the Z car. We picked it up in, I believe, Washington. The roof was dented, dents all down the side, so I had Mauricio take care of that. We did a full glass out, a respray on this car. A couple of the other things we added to it is these headlight covers. You know, a lot of people see it as just headlight covers, but this is a very specific one that was offered by Nissan back when these cars were new. So they're very, very difficult to find, but they have this outer chrome trim and the plexiglass. It gives it a very unique look and really plays off the chrome of the bumper there. There's a lot of really minor differences all throughout the car, and that's what makes Series 1 cars a lot more difficult to restore. Speedometer starts at 20 miles an hour, which is kind of, you know, uncommon for any car. 99 times out of 100, the dashboard's gonna be cracked to oblivion. So having a fully intact original dash that's not cracked is pretty much the holy grail, you know, when it comes to these Z cars. The driving experience on this particular Z is, you know, a little bit different than some of the rest of them that we have. We're using a 2.4-liter motor, but with Mikuni Solex carbs for this, and then I built a complete 2.5-inch stainless steel exhaust. These few modifications make a huge difference and make it a lot more fun to drive. So now that we've made the changes to the subframe to allow the motor to sit where it should be, the next step is to move on to the motor mounts. Because I'm dealing with a pretty crazy angle here, or multiple angles, I do all of the test fitting with a block of wood. Wood is definitely easier to work with than metal. That allows me to get the exact shape that I need to be, which will be easier to transfer to the metal once we know it works. Okay, so this is where it starts to get a little tricky. You know, these mounts will be holding the entire weight of the motor, so I gotta make sure I get it right.
Okay.
Getting the shape on these motor mounts is critical. Not only is that going to allow the motor to sit exactly level where it should be, directly centered in the motor, but we also need to make sure they're strong. This looks like that's sitting exactly where I wanted it to be. So we're gonna tack it into place, just enough that we can pull it out and final weld it. You want to make sure you get some good solid tacks on it because there's nothing worse than pulling it out of the car and then having it fall in pieces. Just have to redo everything again. So let's hope that doesn't happen. With my tacks in place, it's time to pull the mount off and do a final weld. Let's see if this thing bolts on the same as when I left it. I'll be real happy when we can take out these jack stands and the motor's sitting there on its own. First time you pull it off, you know, it's always just like, hopefully it settles in the right spot sort of a thing. Okay, moment of truth here. Time to get rid of our supports. Hopefully the motor doesn't drop out and hit the ground. That's gonna work, man. We have a motor sitting in the car on its own.
That looks really nice. High five.
So we've got the motor in place. The next thing to do now is we need to make that gas pedal work the motor. You know, I'll be honest, I've been running it over in my head. I go to sleep at night, I think about linkage. I wake up in the morning, I think about linkage. Normally, we would have one single plenum that all these would bolt to. And then within that, you've got your throttle linkage bracket. It sits somewhere on it like that. So if you can imagine, we've got our nice, beautiful velocity stack sitting somewhere around here. The last thing we want to do is throw this big, ugly thing directly on top of it. So what we're going to try to do is flip it and have a throttle pole that works directly underneath. And in order to do that, we have to completely reorient all of these linkage arms. You know, this is a little bit of form and function here, so we've got to pretty much re-engineer the way that thing works. You know, this is a lot of work to get right, but it's worth it. The last thing we want to do is have that big ugly thing sitting right over the prettiest part of the motor. When it's all done, it's gonna look amazing. And I might even be able to sleep at night. So I've got the linkage working exactly how I want it to on the motor. Next step to do is to get that cable attached to the throttle pedal. Oh, this is always my favorite place to be. So much room for activities in here. Because the gas pedal was used with linkage before, we've got to make that change and fabricate the end of it to make it work with a throttle cable instead of linkage. It's always the sketchy part. Success. But it functions just as well, and it looks a hell of a lot cooler. So far, so good. I mean, you can actually work the throttle with your foot, which is what you want in a car, so I guess that's good. It took a lot of work to get this right, but in the end, everything's working like it should be, and I can finally sleep at night. So we've got the motor and transmission permanently mounted in the car, and the next thing to do is get onto the gauges. The old gauges just aren't going to cut it. We've got the original ones here, and we've tried to copy the faces as close as we could.
I'm pretty stoked on it. I love accurate instrumentation. So the new speedometer, we went with the GPS unit, and it will be in miles per hour versus kilometers per hour, just because we're special in the US and get our own unit of measurement. Hey man, check this out.
What do you got? Ooh, that looks nice, man. Everything you need is all right there in front of you. You don't have to look over here or anything, it's all right there. Mm-hmm. Nice work, man.
Thanks.
We've got our new header to work with the Neo motor. Yeah, man. But the exhaust on this car, we've modified before because this car is so low. Now, we've got to figure out how to make those two work together. I don't want to change it. So basically what it is it's trying to get the offset of those two pipes to work together. So yeah, looks like everything ended up right where it's supposed to be. Getting all the parts to work together on this build in a combination that, to my knowledge, has never really been done before is definitely a challenge, and there's a struggle with every single part of the equation. You know, a little bit of a bend here. It's a mandrel bend, so it's not really going to hurt exhaust flow at all, but this was much better than trying to change this. One more thing out of the way. And of course, it should perform great, but we haven't even fired it yet, so I don't know. Well, I guess the only thing to do now is
prime the fuel system, check for leaks, and see if we can fire it.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
All right. We've really tried to do our homework and have been meticulous about every step of this process. Are you ready to fire?
Yeah.
Are you sure?
Yeah. Ready?
All right. Big day today. We're going to try to actually fire this motor. We've really tried to do our homework and have been meticulous about every step of this process, hoping that, you know, when it does come time to fire it, that it does what it's supposed to do. Okay, 43.
Perfect.
That's a good sign, but we'll see.
Ready?
All right. Yeah, it's just purring, man. You got pressure?
The gauge isn't working.
It's not reading?
It's not reading.
Not seeing any pressure on the oil gauge is definitely a big concern. I mean, that's the lifeblood of the motor. That's what keeps all your metal moving parts happy. So if we don't have oil pressure, we might not have a motor. Gauges are getting power, right?
Mm-hmm. So I can watch everything on here.
But that does not log oil pressure, right?
No. The engine runs well. You know, I haven't had problems with these oil pumps before, so I'm pretty confident that it's just a gauge we're sending any problem. The pin for it popped out of the
The what?
The pin for it popped out.
How does that pop out?
I just want to see if this works. Ready?
Give it a little bit.
Yeah. We got pressure.
We do.
Yeah.
That's good.
It's definitely a relief, man. We put a lot of time into this, and it's working properly. This is how it should go. Killed it, man.
Thanks.
All right, well, we have oil pressure. It's confirmed. Not just hoping or assuming that we have it, but it's actually showing, so. Man, it sounds good. Can't wait to get it on the road.
Wow, that would have taken a good 10 minutes to get to, what, 60 miles an hour? Wow, that's incredible. This is the first time I'm seeing the car after the motor's been swapped. I'm really excited. The previous motor, it ran well. It is just really low in power. You can actually keep up with the cars on the road now.
Right? Yeah.
It's not going to be embarrassing getting passed up by, you know, some just a random, like, 4-cylinder car.
With the old car, you'd be full throttle. I mean, giving that thing everything it had just to make it to the top of the hill.
I think this is the first time someone has to kind of hold on to things now, you know? Before you can just kind of like just chill, hang out, you know, going on a Sunday drive. Now you gotta make sure you're secured in the car. As a passenger, this is like pretty amazing. The car now, it has so much power and it's much more capable than it was before. It's like a big change, but at the same time, it still feels like very natural for this car.
Pretty happy with it, man. It was a journey to get from A to B, but
yeah,
we got here, and I'm really excited with how it turned out.
For sure.
So you probably want to see it, I guess,
yeah,
right?
absolutely.
See how it turned out.
Wow, this looks amazing.
There's simply taking a motor out of a car, dropping it in, but I think what you and I both wanted for this was something that actually looked proper.
I think we really accomplished the goal. What we got is a hell of a lot more power. We got a car that will just fire up anytime.
Turnkey, no choke, no pumping the gas.
Yeah, it was like a 3-stage process to start it before.
Exactly.
We wanted to keep it naturally aspirated, give it a nice sound, and give it a nice vintage vibe.
At idle, sounds like an RV, but when you rev it,
yeah. Yeah, it sounds really good, yeah.
For me, that's like...
Best of both worlds, absolutely. It's just amazing.
Let me show you what we've done with the gauges here, Josh. Something cool we were able to do here was use a modern gauge, but we were able to copy, you know, the same face, font, style of the original gauges. So, I mean, at first glance, you look in this thing and it almost looks like it's a factory gauge cluster.
I would have to look at the older ones and do a double take.
Yeah.
These look awesome. We tried to really keep some vintage aesthetics, and it just really looks natural. It looks like this is how it should have been done. The exterior, the interior, the motor. I mean, this is a well-built car, and you guys did an amazing job, like, just tying everything in together.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity, man.
Yeah.
This is the only Neo swap that I've ever seen, you know, and I think that makes it unique. I mean, this is definitely a one-of-a-kind.
Right.
So I guess you're probably eager to get behind the wheel and see how it drives, right?
Let's take it for a drive.
Yeah, let's do it.
Wow, it just feels awesome. As soon as you step on the gas, it just goes. Yeah, there's so much power right now. I never felt 100% comfortable driving really long distances versus now it's like, this is like just get in, go. Now this is exactly what I was looking for.
You know, getting behind the wheel and not having to go full throttle all the time. You know, you could actually go part throttle. I think it ticked all the right boxes for him.
Yeah, I wish I had these kind of roads back in Chicago. This would be awesome just to kind of, you know, cruise around on the weekends. Especially with this backdrop here in Utah.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Perfect spot to try it out.
Yeah.
It's been really cool to see it progress from where we got it, you know, this very kind of boring, I guess would be the best way to put it, to something that is just perfect.
I mean, I would have never been able to drive like this, you know, just a year ago.
Right.
So, yeah, this is like really sweet. It's been a long time since I had the car, but I think the time was worth the wait. Now it's time to enjoy it.